Okay, so now we are back. We've got a Friedman response to Sony's motion for sealing, which is a delight. I feel like it's been far too long since we've seen a good Friedman clapback. So I haven't read this yet. Let's see what it brings. Dear Judge Lyman, on behalf of the Wayfarer parties, we write in response to non-party Sony's motion to seal. With narrow exceptions, the documents at issue relate directly to the subject of the summary judgment and spoliation motions, as well as Miss Lively's claims and the Wayfarer party's defences, and should not be sealed. The Wayfarer party's positions on each of Sony's sealing requests are summarised in Appendix A here too. As this court has correctly observed, the presumption of public access is at its highest when the material is relevant to a court's decision on a dispositive motion, such as a motion for summary judgment. Where the presumption applies, continued sealing of the documents may be justified only with specific on-the-record findings that sealing is necessary to preserve higher values, and only if the sealing order is narrowly tailored to achieve that aim. Sony's requests are largely based on the notion that the documents at issue have no relevance to the judicial function. That is wrong. As explained below, each of the items Sony seeks to seal is directly referenced in and relevant to the motions at hand, or it provides valuable context for the court's analysis of those motions. Sony's contrary view of relevance is far too cramped. As the court has ruled, a document is relevant to the performance of the judicial function if it would reasonably have the tendency to influence a district court's ruling on a motion or in the exercise of its supervisory powers, without regard to which the court ultimately rules or whether the document ultimately in fact influences the court's decision. Okay. And in light of the strong presumption of public access at this juncture, Sony's vague invocation of unspecified privacy interests cannot justify sealing, because continued sealing of the documents may be justified only with specific on-the-record findings that sealing is necessary to preserve higher values, and only if the sealing order is narrowly tailored to achieve that aim. Sony primarily seeks to seal comments its executives made about the events underlying this dispute. As this court has acknowledged, a generalized concern of adverse publicity is not a sufficiently compelling reason to outweigh the presumption of access. The information at issue bears on the parties' claims and defenses, and it does not disclose anything private about any Sony employee or competitively sensitive to Sony. It should not be sealed. Sony also argues that certain documents should be sealed based on various evidentiary objections. Okay. It cites no authority holding that such objections are a basis to seal documents, because they are not. Rather, the presumption of public access and the reasoning of Lugosz and its progeny are directed to different concerns than the federal rules of evidence. Okay, 1. So this is the Shapiro Declaration, Exhibit 12. Sony seeks to seal line 296-17 of Exhibit 12, the deposition transcript of Sony executive Ange Giannetti, in which Miss Giannetti confirms that she told Heath she thought Lively was what? I need to know what she thinks Lively is. Full of shit? A grifter? A bitch? Like, what does she think Lively is? It cannot be worse than what so many of us are thinking. Sony contends line 17 should be sealed because it was not expressly cited in the summary judgment materials. Contrary to Sony's contention, the fact that line 17 itself was not expressly cited is not dispositive of whether it should be sealed. The material Sony seeks to seal is directly relevant to the dispute at hand and supports the Wayfarer party's defences, including because it weighs heavily against Lively's contention that she redacted. I feel like this is stuff we need to see. Although the Wayfarer parties did not directly cite that line in their 56.1 statement, they cited the question and response immediately preceding it, and the line Sony now seeks to seal provides important additional context for that statement. Moreover, Sony identifies no privacy interest whatsoever that might justify sealing here. Okay, 2. Shapiro Declaration. This is Shapiro Declaration. I think it's three different exhibits. These documents concern Lively's performance in the film and or the subsequent social media backlash, and were cited in direct support of undisputed material facts on which the Wayfarer parties rely in support of summary judgment. Sony identifies no countervailing privacy interest that would be harmed by unsealing the language it seeks to redact. So, Shapiro Declaration, Rule 56.1 Statement, Lively Counter Rule 56.1 Statement. These documents discuss redacted, comments that redacted, including redacted and redacted. They were directly cited in the Wayfarer Party's 56.1 statement. Though Sony proposes redacting language not directly quoted by the Wayfarer Parties, in her Rule 56.1 counterstatement, Lively refers the court to the cited sources for the complete contents, putting these documents at issue in their entirety. Sony identifies only vague privacy interests of third-party employees as outweighing the strong presumption of public access. Moreover, the comments do not concern anything traditionally considered private rather than public. They discuss Lively and her public conduct. Nor does Sony explain the nature and degree of injury that public revelation could inflict. 3. Garofalo declarations and memoranda in opposition to spoliation motions. Sony asked the court to redact documents in which a Sony executive called Lively a redacted. Oh my god, I need to know. I bet it's twat. I feel like that's the right word that comes to mind when I think of what someone I don't even know could be put in this space. Sony does not dispute that the information it seeks to seal is directly quoted in the Wayfarer Party's moving papers. Thus, Sony's contention that the quoted material has no bearing on the underlying motions is inaccurate. Sony further argues that unsealing the text and quotes would reveal potentially embarrassing conduct, but ignores the fact that embarrassing conduct is traditionally considered private rather than public, only when it has no public ramifications. Here, the information reflects redacted. Such information certainly has public ramifications, and any ensuing embarrassment does not outweigh the interest in public disclosure, especially for a dispositive motion. 4. Gottlieb Declaration and Lively's Counter Rule 56.1 statement. The material Sony seeks to redact from these exhibits is based on opinions and testimony by Lively's expert witnesses. Lively did not seek to seal this information. Sony's proposed redactions for paragraphs 122, 123, 138, 141, 144, and 572 of Lively's Counter Rule 56.1 statement do not cite or quote from any material produced by Sony or any of its employees, but redacted. The same is true for Sony's proposed redactions for Exhibit 17. Lively's experts base their opinions on evidence of Sony and its employees' actions demonstrating the relevance of this evidence to the judicial function. A non-party's desire to avoid public criticism by a party's expert witness is not a cognizable privacy interest that can outweigh the strong presumption in favour of public access to materials submitted in support of or opposition to summary judgment. The Wayfarer parties respectfully request that the court deny Sony's motion as set forth herein. Well, that was potentially spicy. I need to know what is under these redactions. Really well argued, as per usual, like the rest of the oppositions that have come down tonight, actually. Again, need to see how this pans out, but so far I've not seen anything where I think, oh, actually, you know, this is not a good argument, this is not a good response, and Lively or whichever random third party is going to, you know, be successful in sealing their stuff. They may still be successful in sealing their stuff because it's Lyman, but I feel content that Wayfarer's counsel have done everything they can and argued as best possible. So, you know, we'll have to see what Lyman does. Tomorrow I will come back with the Betty Buzz and the Family Hive violins. I've also got an interesting response, an absolutely fascinating response actually, from Friedman's firm. For anyone who's kind of following my commentary on the new lawsuit from the estate of Travis Flores, we've got a lot more context about the original Travis Flores case. So I will be going through the opposition to the lawsuit, the complaint from the widower of Travis Flores. It'd be well worth listening to because I think it's incredibly interesting and gives a lot of context to that lawsuit, the original lawsuit that Travis Flores brought. All right, guys, I am going to call it a night because I'm knackered. I will be back tomorrow.